Welcome to the Adventure Pro podcast. Today on the podcast, on the Adventure Pro podcast, we have Al Topping. Al runs a company called Xtreme Exposure, but I'll let Al introduce himself. So Al, welcome to the podcast. Please tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Okay, thanks, Tom. My name's Al Topping, as Tom's just said. So I run Xtreme Exposures. It's a photographic brand intentionally for the outdoor industry. So my USP, the thing that I do, I suppose, which differentiates me from other photographic businesses, is that I focus specifically for the outdoor industry. And I do that in a couple of ways with the services that I offer for both the larger brands that produce outdoor equipment and things you might use outdoors, as well as those smaller companies who might be educators or instructors of a professional capacity. I'm sure we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it in the next half hour or so.
Oh, fabulous! Yeah, and how long has this been going on? How long have you had the business?
So I started being a professional photographer in the summer of 2019, and it was never really an intention to, or not that I'd had the idea at that point to go into outdoor photography. It had always been an interest because I'm a climber, a mountaineer. I like trail running and mountain biking, that sort of thing, but it had never been a business venture. And so as much as I started taking pictures professionally in 2019 full time, it wasn't until the sort of winter of 2020, and I think it was probably a couple of weeks just before the first lockdown was announced that I thought, let's make a start and do something productive with outdoor photography. So really bad timing, and I don't suppose I could probably have picked a worse time to start. And that's probably contributed to a number of the decisions I've had to make. But in a long way, just about 2 years now when I've been taking pictures professionally. And Xtreme Exposures has probably been, as I say, about 12 to 18 months of that time.
Oh, brilliant! And before that, what did your life look like before?
So it was quite different. I commissioned into the Army in 2011. I was an engineering officer with the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, and I spent 8 years as a regular officer doing all things to do with the Army and being an engineering officer. But then, there was an underlying interest in being outdoors in a climbing and mountaineering sense. And the Army and the other sort of armed forces allow you to train in certain outdoor activities because of the non-tangible benefits of being in those environments where you might be stressed, or you may have to communicate as part of a team. And that was something that I was really interested in. So so I spent a lot of time trying to do that rather than my actual job. Probably put a lot of people's noses out of joint, but there we go. So it was quite different. And photography had always been a bit of a passion. I've spent a reasonable amount of time taking portrait pictures or group photographs of people on courses that I've run, or in those instances where I've been out and about climbing or whatever, paragliding, etc. Taking pictures of those sorts of activities that I was doing as part of my job, but also as I suppose a bit of a pastime. It's sort of there was still that underlying theme of taking pictures and wanting to find the right angle and be in the right place at the right time. So there were some similarities, but actually on a day-to-day basis, it was quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, so someone who's maybe like I like taking photographs, but I'm certainly not a photographer, and someone who's sort of got a passion for it, is interested in getting into photography, certainly in the outdoors. Like what sort of things would you advise them to do? What sort of steps did you take to take it? What was your hobby into now what running a business?
So I think with any job, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur or if you're going to run a business with a team, is you've got to understand what you offer. And regardless of whether you're a good photographer or not, if your business skills are poor, you're going to struggle. So I'd say if you're going to go into photography specifically in the outdoors or in any genre, focus on the business side first, because it doesn't matter how good you are at taking a picture. If you can't find somebody to buy it, then it's kind of pointless, and it will always be a hobby. So yeah, I would say, clearly spend time getting better at taking pictures. But actually, if you're going to invest in anything, I'd say invest in the ability to be able to find customers who are willing to pay for your services, and get them, and be able to understand how to sell, how to market yourself, and build that presence. Because it is all irrelevant, as I say, unless you can find somebody to pay for it. So after that, by all means, go for your life and work out how to take a decent picture and trial and error. And I spent a lot of time being self-taught, read magazines. YouTube wasn't really a thing at the point that I started, but it's certainly something that I do dip into now and again. And then, just practice. And I'd say the largest thing that's helped me since I've started professionally is just having the camera there next to me, knowing that I don't need to take a picture every day, but taking a picture every day will help you, and you'll learn something from that, even if you're not going to the external resources to be able to guide you. You will work it out eventually. And then there are courses. I did invest in a course towards the end of my time in the army. But it was a wedding course, it was a portrait course, there was a bit of product photography, which I've since taken on board a bit further. But ultimately it was understanding principles of photography and lighting and how you compose a picture and what makes it good, what makes it bad, how you can pose your models if you're using models, and that sort of thing. It wasn't, let's go outside today, we're going to take pictures of climbers, because I suppose, and that might be a niche if anybody's interested, there's no courses for people to learn how to go and take outdoor photos at this point in time. So you've got to find your technical ability in other areas.
And the course that you went on, was that an online course, or was it in person?
So I was fortunate that I was able to go into a studio itself. So one of the things that I've taken from that sort of studio experience is understanding the kit that goes into being in a photography studio, and I've brought that into Xtreme Exposures, which I'm sure again we'll talk about in a bit. But it was a in-person course, and personally for me that works better, because you can sort of put away all the distractions and you can focus on what was good about what you were learning, and that person's there with you. You've got other people in the room with you that you can sort of learn from, and that for me was the best way to do it. I have tried online courses and things as well, but just as I understand how I work best and how I learn best, and an in-person attendance course is really good, and I got the most from it there. So yeah, that was
brilliant.
Good.
I guess the fact that you are, as you say, just using all of these different types of equipment, and it needs to be hands-on in that respect, doesn't it? Yeah. So when you go out now, for example, you go out climbing, hill running, mountaineering, do you take a massive camera with you?
Well, in an ideal world you would, because the bigger cameras have the better image quality, have the better lenses that can get you closer to whatever it is that you're trying to take pictures of. But then you've got that weight balance, and that having that cumbersome item with you, you might have to have a spare couple of lenses. You might need a flash. You might need, I don't know, if you're taking video, you might need all this other sort of paraphernalia that goes with it. So it's very much a case of understanding what you're going to do, where you're going to be in the scene. I mean, if you've ever tried taking a picture of a climber while you're on the rope, you're limited to where you can get to in order to take a decent picture. So the circumstance also dictates what it is that you can do and how much variety you get in your shots. The classic climbing photo is you're on a belay with another guy or girl standing next to you who's actually doing the rope work, and there's a leader above you, and all you can do at that point is the classic up the bum shot, which we've all seen, we've all taken. It doesn't look great, and that's basically it. But it proves the point that unless you're going to be able to get off that rope line, maybe create your own line to the side, or if you're a drone flyer, use a drone. You're kind of limited, and therefore there's no point taking a massive camera because you've only got one perspective. So there's a bit more to it, and I try to take my DSLR as much as I can, but it becomes a trade-off. And what do you want to do? Do you want to go climbing today, or do you want to take pictures? And that's the decision that needs to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and lots and lots of people I've spoken to who've sort of turned their passion into a passion for adventure, and that's what this podcast is about, really, into what they do day to day. I'm always intrigued to learn, where's that boundary, sort of where do you stop? Presumably you're constantly looking for amazing photos, and I'm just wondering, I'm just always interested, does it detract from that hobby aspect? Does it detract from you being a mountaineer, being a fell runner? Do you ever sort of switch off, and do you ever?
No, and that could be a factor of the amount of time I've been doing it. But at the same time, I mean, my sort of 10 years in the army, I lived in flat places, or places that were so far from the mountains or decent crags that I suppose it's been difficult to get to places regularly enough. I mean, I'm also a family guy. I've got a wife, I've got 2 kids and a dog and that sort of thing. And so, there's a commitment there. And so throughout that period of time where I was in the army, it was very much a case of you've got to pick and choose what you're going to do for those opportunities that you've got. And so the separation of those two activities, the photography and the climbing or whatever it is, hasn't really come. I mean, I do make business decisions sometimes about what I'm going to do on a particular day, and largely throughout the week my time's my own, to be able to pick and choose what I want to do. And I've got some sort of personal goals and things that sort of time with that as well. But I haven't lost that passion for doing both. But I will always have my phone with me. So if there is something that just appears in front of me, then I'll pull out my phone and I'll take a picture. And I'm not against using iPhones and whatever else you've got in your pocket for taking decent pictures, because there's always the social media machine that needs feeding. And it doesn't matter if it's come off an SLR or if it's coming off your phone, because the picture quality is sufficient for that. But if I was doing something for a client, then clearly there's different boundaries and things that you have to consider, and you can't just whip out your phone and take a picture and submit it to a client, because they probably wouldn't be happy. So I haven't lost that passion at all. It's brilliant. Pick something you love and just go with it. Yeah, and that's what's happened here.
Brilliant. So in terms of running the business itself, what does a day in the life for you look like, Al? Like day to day, what do you do most of?
So it's quite upsetting, and my wife complains that for an outdoor photographer, I don't spend a huge amount of time outdoor taking pictures. But that's the nature of any photography business. Most of it is finding new clients, editing images, updating your social media, doing your marketing, doing your accounts, and then there's that networking side as well, which we're in a digital age, and a lot of it will start with being on LinkedIn, searching through the Facebook groups, or contacting that influencer on in Instagram or whatever it might be, to try and drum up those opportunities. And so the times that I do go out, unless it's walking the dog first thing in the morning, or I've picked a day in advance where there's a bit of a weather window to go and do something for myself, I'll have to plan those sort of times outside taking photos quite a long time in advance. So for instance, I'm now looking at what are we now, with the start of November or mid-November, I'm looking at shoots for client work and for portfolio building, either just before Christmas and just after Christmas. And clearly you don't know what the weather is there, but you've still got to do the planning and prep for that. So, I suppose on a day-to-day basis, it will be do whatever I've got to do in the morning to satisfy the sort of kids and get them to school and walking dogs and that sort of thing, which I think everybody has to do, don't they, at some point. And then it's a case of, right, let's sit down, let's plan the things that we've got to do, and where that involves going outside and taking pictures, then yeah, clearly that happens. But unfortunately, it's not all, for me, it's not all, let's be outside and take pictures all the time, because at some point you've got to sit down, you've got to edit them, you've got to advertise yourself and what you do. So it's a good balance. It's a good balance.
It sounds like a good balance. Yeah, absolutely. And does it tend to be sort of Monday to Friday, and do you stick to certain times? How does that work in terms of allocating time to different projects?
So let me caveat that. So my working week started 9 to 4ish, I suppose, because I've got kids and I've got other things that I need to do. My wife works in quite a punchy job, and we sort of work as a team to sort of do the other things around the sides. But yeah, essentially, I try and protect my weekends as much as possible, to have family time and sort of abstract from work stuff. But from time to time, I do other things as well. So last weekend, I had a wedding that I took pictures for as well. So it's not just outdoor photography that I focus on, and sometimes just the nature of it, it may spill into the weekends. But otherwise, I try and keep things in on Monday to Friday. If nothing else, that's where my customers tend to operate as well. Yeah. Most will protect those weekends, or will just be 9 to 5 Monday to Friday kind of opportunities. And so that's really the driver, I suppose.
Brilliant. And in terms of you getting your sort of first clients, like you've got this business idea, and you're obviously an accomplished photographer. How do you then go out and get your first client? What do you do? Who do you speak to?
So I think with anything, it's either any sort of small business, it's a case of do it for somebody that you know and build a portfolio. And this is all, it's about credibility, it's about networking, and it's about demonstrating to yourself that you can do what you think you can do. Because that in itself opens up other doors. So the first thing is portfolio. No one's going to employ you to do something if you can't demonstrate, certainly in our case, visual form, what it is that you say that you can do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to be able to then go and network with those people and find those relevant people. Because again, networking nowadays, it's not just something you do in the street. It might be, but there's a digital world as well, and so that building that brand is an important thing. Even if you've decided not to take the plunge into it, I would start building that network early, and fostering those relationships, whether they be in person or whether they be digitally, for instance. And then the third thing is actually, demonstrating to yourself that you can do it. So that's not just a case of, in a photographic case, taking the picture. It's finding the clients, negotiating the sale, doing the work, and then delivering. And and having the sort of confidence to come out at the end of that process and say, I can do this, build your own internal confidence, but other people see it as well, and it allows you to grow as a business person, because it's pretty cutthroat, especially in the photography industry, because everybody will call themselves a photographer if they can take a decent picture. It might be the worst picture in the world, but as long as it's better than two other people they will call you a decent photographer. So you've got to be pretty good at what you're doing, and yeah, it's get your work out there as much as possible. So those are the 3 tips that I'd say for anybody who's looking to get into any sort of photographic industry. Build your portfolio, build your network, and then prove to yourself that you can do it.
Fabulous. They are some top tips. I'm sure people will glean a lot from those. Absolutely brilliant. So what does your ideal client look like? You said that you do some, I've had a quick look around your website, you do some branding work, you do some product, physical product work, but what's your ideal client look like? Someone comes to you, right, this is my bread and butter client.
So if I take, let's sort of get it in 2 ways. So there's branding and there's product photography. So if we take the branding side of things, it tends to be individuals, outdoor instructors, small establishments that might be educational centres, and they need to highlight their portfolio. They need to demonstrate to the world and stand out from everybody else who's doing the same thing, who is taught by the same people, who operate at the same crags, who deliver the same services and products. And it's those people who want to differentiate themselves in some form or other. And for those people who want to do that, one of the very, I suppose, easy ways to do it is through their visual stance on the social media and that sort of thing. So that's sort of the branding side of things. The product photography that I offer is in-studio product photography, which is more of your sort of your advertising pictures, highly refined images that you might see in glossy magazines with a load of text next to it. The new climbing widget or the new bike pedals or whatever they might be. So there's that side of things, and then there's the more lifestyle pictures, which I would imagine I've probably got a lot more competition with. People going out, they've got a new pair of ice climbing boots or a new helmet or something, and they want to show that product being used in the outdoors, in the environment it was intended to be. So there's a bit of a distinction there, but largely they'll be the people the clients that will go for that service are obviously the manufacturers. Distributors don't tend to go for bespoke photography because they get their product photography from the suppliers, from the manufacturers. So outdoor gear manufacturers, whether in the UK or abroad, small independent companies, large international companies. I'm quite happy with either, I suppose. The smaller companies tend to have less of a budget, and therefore they're perhaps looking for a bit of experience to help them guide the process, because they don't have the large marketing or design teams behind them to be able to guide that. Whereas the larger companies, they might have an idea, they might have a brand that's already quite well established, and so there's a bit more clarity at the start of the process as to what it is that they want. But ultimately, you all end up with the same sort of thing, decent images that fit the brief and help to market that particular product or that brand. So that's who I hope to work with and have done in the past. So.
Oh, brilliant! It always amazes me when you've just given a long answer to what I think should be one of the most important things. Who is your avatar? Who is that person that you're trying to get on board? And if you don't know that, then how are you supposed to find them? Where do these people hang out? What are they trying to achieve from using you as a provider?
That was one of the hardest things, I think, when I started, is you can have an idea of the service that you want to provide, but as I said earlier, you've got to know who to sell it to, and that network, that's where that network comes in, because if you don't know them individually, if they're not to quote sort of, I suppose, LinkedIn, if they're not a first order connection, then maybe they might know somebody who is in that industry who might be a second or a third order connection. And so it's paramount that you can build that network first, because otherwise you're not, I'm an individual who runs a business in photography in the outdoor industry. I don't know the person who lives on the other side of the planet who's looking for photos of, some sponsored athlete who might be coming over here this weekend to go climbing in the Lake District. But I wanted, and I need to find that person before they get here, obviously. So it all comes down to the network. But yeah, understanding that avatar is so fundamental, and those best business skills come in, and it took a long time to realize that. But I think having lockdown in some perspective or other has been quite helpful, because nobody's been working throughout that period in the outdoor industry, particularly the outdoor guides or education establishments, and the manufacturers. They're probably ramping up their production of gear now, but again, they will have been affected by it. So having that sort of industrial pause, I suppose, while we're all locked down, was quite useful for that moment to be able to think about what it was that I wanted to do and what direction I wanted to go in, and how to differentiate my services from the other photographers out there. I mean, there's brilliant photographers, both in a product sense, both in a branding sense, those that like hanging off ropes, those that like following trail runners or mountain bikers or whatever. And hopefully, people will agree that the things that I do are quite niche, because they combine certain elements which actually some businesses really look for. That differentiation is key, I suppose, to what we do. So
And since starting your business, have you made any really glaring mistakes that you thought, oh wow, I'm just going to put this to bed, I've learned a lot? And if so, what were those mistakes?
So I suppose there are two significant ones. Nothing that's affected clients. Let's just set that tone first of all. But they are business decisions, which I suppose. I'll tell you what they are. So the first one. So towards the end of the time that I spent in the regular army, I was looking around for what to do, and I thought I've always wanted to get into doing web development or sort of techie stuff. And the reason for that is I've got a robotics degree. I've got a master's in robotics. So, and I've never used it. Well, I say that I did have a couple of jobs after I left my university, but I've never really applied it as much as I wanted to. So I thought, well, let's go and do something techie, So I couldn't go back into robotics because it'd been so long since I'd done it. I can't do the maths anymore, I'll be honest with you. But I still had computing skills, and I still enjoyed, finding out the technical aspect of things and how things work. So I thought I'd go into doing web design and development. I like being creative. I like the coding side of things, and it was something that I could do wherever we lived, wherever we choose to live, because my wife was in the army as well, and so we moved about quite a lot. So having a shop wasn't really a thing. So that idea went up until I went on that course, that photography course, and I went on the course thinking I just need to go and do something different, see what's out there. And I came away from that course going, photography, let's scrap this web development sort of idea and go into photography. And I think, as much as it wasn't a mistake to start doing web development, I spent a lot of time and effort thinking about it, where I could have been looking at photography and doing something that I know that I enjoyed, and I know that was something that was really passionate to me. So that for me was a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted effort, and I probably could have done something a bit more realistic. Starting earlier on in my transition out of the army. The second thing is it's more of a business skills point. So when I started, it was a case of, right, well, let's invest in a website. I'm not going to do it myself. Well, I might do it myself. Yeah, I'll do it myself. Okay, so that was, 3 months gone, being too close to the project that I was trying to do, and not focusing on the important things, like building that network, like proving to yourself that you could actually deliver the things that you wanted to do, and learning business. And I focused again a lot of time, some money on things that ultimately, when you're starting out and you haven't proved your idea, were actually, it was a big waste of time. So I think, my biggest mistakes are making the wrong decisions and not being informed in a business sense before I've actually settled on an idea. It's not like dropping cameras off the side of cliffs in the middle of client meetings and that sort of thing. But those are the things that have driven the way that my business is now. It's those are the sort of errors that I've made because of my lack of business experience at that point. I mean, last time I did anything to do with businesses was when I was at school, and I was, ignoring business studies lectures and that sort of thing. And I never thought I would go into business. I started out doing robotics. Why would I then go into business and being a photographer, 2 careers on? So, it comes down to hindsight, and when you look at it from this point, I shouldn't have done that because I spent so much time and effort. And little did I know that later on in the year we'd be locked down for 18 months. So actually, I should have been putting myself out there and doing the right things then. And I would probably be in a different place now. Well, I would have been in a different place now, but it's great to look back on it and think, I shouldn't have done that. But you learn from it, don't you?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess I made plenty of massive mistakes in business, and I certainly, so long as I'm still alive, I'm still okay, I'm not bankrupt. I guess there's that. It's fear setting, isn't it? It's about saying, what is the absolute worst that could happen if I do X, Y, Z, and I think that's a wonderful world in which we live, in that we're able to experiment a little bit, but there is that sort of. I've certainly made some decisions where I thought I've done too long. I spent too long doing that, and I've wasted time. But it's never wasted time if you come out the other end.
But it's all a learning experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. So sure. Your failures don't mean the end. Your failures are just part of the journey. So for me, I might have started out doing robotics, 15 years ago. I might have been an army officer, but along the way, I've become the person that I am. And I think, if anything, as with photography in any industry, it's about the person that you become and how you interact with people, and how you network and blah blah blah. So I wouldn't change it. I've annoyed people, including the wife, who is not always seeing the value in some of the things that I've done. But we are where we are now, and we're still married, which is obviously a result.
Fabulous. 10 out of 10. Brilliant. And of all of the jobs that you've done, is there one that you just think, wow, this isn't a wacky concept, and there's no way I would have ever dreamt I'm doing this job? Is there a sort of standout job that you've done?
So I think the standout job has to be the first one, and I went ice climbing in. Sounds
great already.
Yeah, it was Norway. It was end of January, I think, and it was basically the one that made me the job that made me think, this is what I want to do. And there were people on the trip who, they had other jobs, and they were office based, and that was them. They're not getting out of the office. Even if they want to, they won't ever commit to it. And I was getting up with a spring in my step in the morning thinking, I'm going to go out climbing and we're going to take some gnarly pictures, and we'll see what happens. And at the end of it, I thought, why am I not doing this more often? Because it is what stokes the fire for me. Whether it's a tiny crag, your local crag down the road where, I take my daughter climbing, for instance, and she's 6, and I've got a little boy who's 2, and he's started as well. It doesn't matter if we're going climbing and there's an opportunity to take a decent picture, I'm happy. Or if we're going out, there's people going running, and you're there with your camera to be able to take a decent picture of the sort of mountainscape with 2 lone figures running down this arete or whatever with a big cloud in the background. It excites me talking about taking a decent picture, because to me, photography is about freezing a moment in time and being able to look back at that, and it's the emotion that you get from that picture that makes it. So it doesn't matter how good the picture is, if at the end of the day the person that looks at it goes, that was me and, I don't know, my best friend or whatever, and we had the most incredible day out, and as much as the rain was coming in and we were soaking wet and we've got hurty feet or whatever else, we had the most amazing day. That emotional impact is what makes a good picture, and that's what I get something out of that. So as much as it might not have been a wacky job, it was pivotal for me for doing that, and it sort of set the tone for everything else that I now do. And yeah, it's sort of encapsulated everything about photography that I love. The experience, the remoteness, the arduous nature of the job, and ultimately it's about those people looking back at that going, that was great, that was an awesome day, and then they put it on the wall, or you see it in a magazine, and that's me, and they're showing their friends. That's what starts the fire. So
yeah. Did you have any issues on that particular trip with things freezing?
No. To be fair, Norway, where did we go? We went to Hemsedal, which is a sort of ski resort. I'd say about halfway up, sort of I can't talk now, halfway through Norway from south to north. And yeah, it wasn't too bad at all. I mean, we didn't get to, minus 30, 40 or anything like that. To be fair, it was quite pleasant. Wind chill was a bit of a factor from time to time, just because you can't hold your camera while you're getting buffeted from side to side. But hey ho, occupational hazard. It wasn't bad at all. But I think I've probably been in colder places, just going skiing. I've been in Austria and on the Stubai Glacier in December time, and it's minus 40, and you're just thinking, we shouldn't be here.
Wow.
And that's just a
40.
Yeah, it was with wind chill as well. We obviously have to checking yourselves to make sure you're not getting frostnip and all sorts, and going into. And these are tufty, burly army blokes going, oh, it's a bit chilly. We'll go inside and have a brew. But that's the way it was. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and at the end of each of the podcasts, I like to ask three final questions just to see the podcast out. So, number one is, what piece of advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
Right. So 10 years ago, I'd just commissioned from the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, and I'd just finished taking my company's worth of group photographs. So I wasn't supposed to, because there was a company that were paid to do that sort of thing, but the guys that I worked with at the time, they were all like, Topping, you can take a decent picture. You take the group photo and we'll pay you for it, and we'll undercut these guys, because they were quite pricey and they didn't really see the value in it. But hey ho. So I did as my superiors were telling me, and I took a bloody good picture. And to be fair, I did quite well out of that little business venture, but I never followed it on. I never followed it through. So I think my advice to myself 10 years ago would be, keep doing your photography on the side, keep pushing it, build that network, and even if you don't end up going into it in the future, you've got something to fall back on. So it was about the passion for taking pictures, the fact that people respected me for taking a good picture, but I just didn't capitalize on it. and as much as I still had a career, just in front of me at that point, and I ended up doing another 9 and a bit years at that sort of stage. I could have started earlier. So I think that would be my advice. Just start earlier, keep it going, and when you finish, you'll be in a lot better place than you are now.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is sound advice. So question number 2 then. What valuable resource, for example, a book, YouTube channel, piece of equipment, blog, podcast, app, or other, can you recommend to help others following a similar path to you?
I think if you can, it would be the resource for it. Well, it's ultimately to learn how businesses work. And there's a couple of things that I have done for that. One is I read a lot of books, a lot of business related books. And I'm always sort of, when you go on Amazon, there's people who watched or read this also read other. Yeah. I go through that. And I link those in with podcasts that I listen to. So if I find an author of a book that I think looks quite interesting, I'll go and see if there's a podcast of that person speaking, and I'll see if there's any value in the person from basically getting that list of people on Amazon to sort of understand if that's the kind of material I think I need to learn, because you don't know what you don't know, do you? So and that's where I was when I started out my business journey. Where is the information that I need, and how can I get it? So I suppose the resource, it might even be Amazon. To put it into one word, it might be Amazon. But I went through Amazon, found some business books, and then I went through the list of other books that have been recommended, and then I went and listened to those people talking on podcasts. So I suppose you can combine it with podcasts. That's probably the resource that I go for, because it's a way of finding out the information without having to spend money on the wrong things, because you can get an idea about whether that person actually knows what they're talking about, or whether they're just copying somebody else's idea and rebranding it as something completely different. The business resource has been pretty fundamental to improving, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing unless I had sort of some form of business acumen, which I've never formally been trained in. So
and can you think off the top of your head any of those books that or the authors?
So I did. Let's think. You put me on the spot.
Sorry.
I will send you some of my recommended ones, and then Brilliant. If you want to chuck them in show notes or comments, then that's great. I don't want to mispronounce their names or just give them the wrong names, but there are a few that have really sort of helped me along the way. And I think LinkedIn books in particular, there's one, in fact I can quote one, if he's listening, Daniel Disney, the same surname as the sort of theme park.
Walt.
Walt, that's him. But he does a lot of LinkedIn sales training, and he's produced a book. It's a black one, which again I'll send you the details for. But
please do.
That's been useful in just knowing how to put yourself out there onto LinkedIn, and I've recommended it to a couple of people, so that one's pretty good. I'll send you the details.
I'll have to check that out. I've never heard of that. That's great, and I'm an avid podcast listener, but also I do find myself reading more and more, and I think it's a good thing to, we're constantly learning from everything that we do, and I think just to learn from people that are just a few levels higher than you, I mean, of course that's going to benefit you, and I love reading business books. I'm completely obsessed.
It's a bit nerdy, isn't it?
It is very nerdy. It is very, but I don't think it'll change. I don't think I'll ever change. I just love it. Okay, so question 3 then, the final question. What would you like to see change about the adventure, the industry that you're in? So you've obviously turned your passion for the outdoors, combine that with passion for photography. Is there anything you'd like to see change in the industry at all?
So I think the industry is going in a good way. I think what I would suggest needs to be changed is the general public's perspective of the outdoors. Excuse me. So things like conservation, understanding an individual's impact on the environment, particularly in the sort of honeypot places like Snowdonia, the Lake District, parts of Scotland, Peak District, that sort of thing, and how we as a species impact on the natural world. And it's down to things like use of disposable barbecues, discarding litter, polluting waterways, that sort of thing, which the industry itself does a lot to try and combat. There's a lot of ambassadors for this sort of activity, but you know, I've been out in the lakes where I live here, you know, just taking the dog for a walk, for instance, and stumbled across somebody they'd been in their camper. I've got nothing against campers because I'm a camper as well. I've got a van, but they'd obviously had a breakfast on a disposable barbecue, and then discarded it in the car park. And you just think, you know, it was still smouldering, which was annoying. Not only for the fact that I had to clear it up because nobody else would, but also because it then stunk out my van as well. You know, it's just like it's just a selfish nature which can be avoided by a bit of forethought and planning. You know, it's those sorts of things that I think need to change. So the education of the general population is important. I mean, it's great that more and more people are looking to the outdoors, particularly as a result of being confined indoors for such a long time. You know, the outdoor industry as a whole is probably profiting quite well as a result of it, and you know, there's more opportunity to do things. But I think it's important that the education of people going into the outdoors is important, not just for everybody's enjoyment. I suppose there's also the safety side of things as well. So, for instance, you know, going to Snowdonia and going up Snowdon in a pair of flip-flops and a t-shirt with you know, when there's snow on the ground, you know, that sort of thing. It's just not really cricket, is it? You don't do that. And that puts a burden on everybody else. So that would be my suggestion and my thoughts for sort of change.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Well, you know, well, hopefully those things will change in the future. And yeah, certainly I've seen my fair share of it. Certainly up in the mountains. I'm just down the road from Snowdon, so see the flip-flops quite regularly, and it's just about education, and it's just about making sure people understand that the impact that they're having, not just on the environment, but the people who, you know, live and work in those environments. Fabulous. Well, thanks ever so much for taking the time to appear on the podcast. I'll certainly let you know when this goes live. And if people want to get in contact with you and find a little bit more about Xtreme Exposures, where's the best place to do that?
So I have a website which is xtremeexposures.com, and as with all my social handles, Xtreme is spelt without the first E. So it's XTREME Exposures, all one word, .com. That's my web address. And then, as I say, for Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, we're all the handle again is just Xtreme Exposures. There's no underscores, no dashes or anything, but it is spelt without that first E. So do come and say hello, and if you've got any ideas and things that you want taking pictures of, by all means come and have a chat. I'm more than happy to do so.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks again, Al, for your time, and maybe we'll do a round two in the future. It'd be great to see where we are a little bit further down the line, and thanks again. Cheers.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you.